as founders, engage with VCs, especially the ones that you love, and ask for things. Don't just ask for advice, ask for practical things. So ask, even and I have always asked, even in early conversations with people. In fact, I sometimes tell VCs, hey, right now is not a good time. I'm really sorry. But if you have a CIO that is cool to talk with, just jump on the call with me and with them, and you'll hear firsthand how we're pitching Lumos, and we can debrief you and I after for 15 minutes.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Something New, the podcast where we talk about interesting things going on in tech for people building something new. Or at least people aspiring to build something new. I'm Leeor.
And I'm Steph.
Think of us as a bit of a technical how I built this, but maybe a little bit less Guy Raz and a little bit more Guy Riz.
This is the peak, and then we're going downhill from here.
I'm using my podcast voice. Hey, so on this episode, we're doing a little something different for the intro. We're bringing on my lawyer for our first fund, and excited to have Teal join us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. When people ask me about like legal stuff, Teal, and I don't mean to wax poetic. I'm not asking for like lower fees or anything, but I'm probably one of the few people who's like actually has like a very strong NPS with the law firm they look like. I always go out of my way to recommend you, especially for emerging managers. Just maybe for the audience's sake, like maybe give a little bit of a quick background on yourself and how did you start working with, emerging managers specifically over the course of time?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a non-traditional background. I started in white shoe law in M&A at a firm called Cravath, Swaine and Moore, representing just giant public companies that were buying up private companies. So big clients like IBM, a company called ATK that's now called Orbital ATK. And then I went into legal tech and worked for LegalZoom, for a co-founder of LegalZoom, and spun my own legal tech company out of that, backed by First Round, Founder Collective, a bunch of great seed firms, and built that for 5 years. But we sort of fell off the venture track, and I went back into law, but this time on the venture finance side. And I really got pulled into the fund counsel side of things because there just seemed to be kind of a vacuum for quality, fund counsel for the smaller emerging managers who are starting $10 million, $20 million funds. And I had clients who were kind of on the company side who were starting to potentially, raise their own funds. And it was just clear that, there wasn't anyone out there who was really serving the market well. So I wound up getting pulled into a couple of these fund formations, really enjoyed it, really liked the community, and decided to stick around. And now I run a boutique that really just does, fund formation, fund counsel for emerging managers, and I love the work.
Very cool. One of the kind of reasons I wanted to bring you on is because there's been a lot of talk, especially in the last week, is a tweet kind of went mini viral that it costs, $1 million to start a fund. And, I'm thinking to myself, that's not my experience. And so, but maybe out there are folks that are kind of setting up funds in certain ways and whatnot. Like from your perspective, like what are the common, missteps for someone trying to start a fund? What are best practices? Like, how do you think about it from your perspective as you're giving advice to someone who's like thinking about embarking on this journey?
Well, yeah, don't spend $1 million on a larger fund. That's way too much money. Well, first off, just to address, the costs, because I think that's a gross misrepresentation of how much it costs to start a fund anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe you spend $1 million, very plausible you can spend $1 million over a 10 to 15 year term of a fund on administrative costs and accounting, and maybe you're doing an audit. But the cost to set up and kind of get a fund off the ground should be, if you're doing a kind of 10 million, 20 million, fund one, I don't know, 50K, 75K, much below 100K.
Yeah, that's my experience.
Launch costs. And then I think your cost to run it every year, if you're doing it efficiently in terms of your admin, your accounting, if you're probably doing like pre-seed and seed on safes, even your legal should be, closer to like 75K a year, 80K a year. So well below that, $1 million kind of initial price tag. So if you're hitting anywhere close to there, you're doing things very wrong, or you're setting up a very large, very complicated fund with like substantial offshore structures and stuff like that, and your lawyers are overbilling you as well. I think I see is kind of focusing in on the fund costs and that barrier to entry. I see folks mess up in a couple of ways. One is that they will start paying costs out of pocket or agree to pay costs out of pocket as a manager before the fund is formed. So you see this with some legal costs where you might retain a lawyer, and that lawyer might bill you hourly, and they might send you bills before your first close. The service providers who are kind of interest aligned with you will be billing your fund out of first close and not you personally, as you kind of struggle to set this thing up. Shouldn't be out of pocket for a lot of this stuff. Your admin fees, your formation costs should really be paid by the fund itself, which is coming out of capital. It's not coming out of your management fee. And
I guess to double click into that real quick, especially at the fund sizes you're talking about. I mean, obviously if someone's raising $100 million fund, I mean, they might be griftering, but at least like you kind of can quickly tell that they can be able to raise it. Now at the smaller fund sizes, it's a little bit more like opaque. And so how much like work are you doing to make sure that they'll be able to actually like get to that spot so that you will get paid for the time that you put in?
I mean, there's a good amount of diligence that goes into who I work with, and I'm betting on every client, but also the work that I'm doing is very phased, and there should be a fairly small amount of legal work that gets done before you have fundraising momentum and before it's clear that you're going to make it to a first close. So sort of I would say the comprehensive list for most managers is you want to know the basic terms of your fund, and they're only, there are fewer than 10 of them maybe that you want to pin down before you go out and fundraise, so you can just speak intelligibly about the thing that you're setting up. You're going to want to understand the regulatory constraints from your fundraising process. And that's really around how can you communicate about the fund? What can you say about the fund? How many LPs can you have? So you can kind of construct your average check size that you're shooting for and stuff like that. And then you might want a lawyer to take a look at your marketing materials and make sure that you're not saying anything in a way that's going to trigger the SEC or give fodder to a plaintiff's firm if something goes really south for you. But that's, that's like you sit with a lawyer for an hour or two and you kind of check all that off the list. Yeah. So on my end, when I take on a client, I try to do that work and then get them what they need to kind of go out into the market and get some fundraising momentum. We're not doing docs. We're not forming entities before it's clear that you actually you're gonna get to a first close. And all of that stuff, signing up with your admin, sitting through 4 or 5 calls with potential admins and interviewing them and getting pricing and negotiating that, doing that with your accountant, negotiating a term sheet with a potential anchor, like all of that kind of heavy lifting, lots of hours, lots of investment, that doesn't happen until there's line of sight to a first close. And at that point, it's fairly de-risked and it's pretty clear, at least from my perspective, that I'm going to get paid out of the thing.
Yeah, I'm curious, thinking about that tweet that Leeor mentioned about like the $1 million sort of cost, it's very apparent that that's very far from kind of like the reality that we're speaking in. I'm curious if there are other things outside kind of the legal stuff that she may be talking about, whether it's like fund admin stuff. I imagine that doesn't kick in until later. Maybe she was, talking about cost of living stuff while you're fundraising and not getting paid if you're not working full time elsewhere. Is there anything else that I could be missing that maybe isn't that startup cost estimate?
The cost of living and maintaining yourself while you go out and raise a fund, which can take in this market 12, sometimes more, 18 months to get to first close, like that can be significant, varies highly depending on your own financial circumstances and your cost of living.
Right.
I don't know, maybe you've got a really expensive lifestyle. But the other stuff, again, who pays it and when it's paid is highly relevant, because your admin costs, your other service providers, your everyone who's servicing the fund business model really expects to get paid after first close. And primarily, this can vary, but especially for fund ones, almost everything does get paid by the fund itself. So, that's not that that's not real money or anything like that, but in terms of like, I think that this is all being positioned as this like giant hurdle to entry, barrier to entry for new managers. And it's not, if you can raise, if you can raise the fund can pay its costs, and it's like a relatively small percentage of your total fund size. Assuming like $20 million fund one, your admin cost is going to run you somewhere between probably $25,000 and $40,000 a year, and that's going to probably be your one single largest expense. You can get it down even for a $20 million fund. There's certain fund admins out there who might do it for 15K a year. Like there's some good deals out there with reputable service providers, but I think that if you're budgeting for this, it's probably like 30K is what you should put in your budget for a fund admin annually. And there won't be, substantial one-time upfront costs associated with that admin either. Accounting, you should tack on an extra $10,000, $12,000 a year probably for accounting. And again, you can find folks who will do it for probably as low as $5,000 or $6,000 a year. But I think just for budgeting purposes, 10K is probably about right. If you are forced to do an audit, which I think for a fund that size, you should try to avoid. But that's going to be, 20, 25K a year. And then if you're a pre-seed seed fund and you're mostly you're not leading rounds and you're doing work mostly on safes, I would budget, a fairly small amount, 10K a year for your deal work too. So, you can add all that up, and I don't know where it gets you exactly, but it should be south of $75,000 a year, like a fairly reasonable amount of money to run a fund. And it should be sustainable to run. And you should have a cost ratio that allows you to run a fund that's a 10 million.
Another thing that's become more accepted for smaller funds is, like you accelerate the fees a little bit. And so you might be, it's still 2 and 20 over the course of the life of the fund, but the number, the kind of management fee up front might be a little higher. And then in, starting year 4 might be a little bit lower. So you can also like shift around some capital a little bit. There's been like some kind of precedent for that as well. And so there's a couple other like levers, I think, that are, even if anything, this arrow is pointing towards like kind of lowering the barrier for entry, working with these kind of like sophisticated admins as well. There's some pretty good ones who can kind of handle a lot of different things. And, at the very least, you might pay a little bit more on maybe on some dimensions, but in the long term, you're kind of paying a little bit less because you're not having to like stitch together a bunch of things. And it's kind of saving you a little bit on time as well. And so you can kind of like run like more of almost like a distributed shop. And so there's kind of these like levers that are emerging that I think, if anything, will democratize it even further.
I'm curious, kind of flipping maybe the question to you, Leeor, like you mentioned, you're one of the few people who have like a high NPS in regards to who they work with on the council side. And I can relate to that in the sense that I've, from friends that we probably have in common, I've heard similar things. I'm curious, like what you look for in your kind of relationship and why you enjoy working with Teal so much that maybe other councils don't provide as much.
Yeah, happy to. I think like fundamentally I think a lot of lawyers are not business people, in my experience. And having someone who's kind of gone through the ringer on that dimension and gone through an entrepreneurial journey and worked in industry, but also has the legal type background is like doesn't grow on trees. And so I think that was something that I was like immediately kind of drawn to. I think another thing I look for is like, I'm not a lawyer, so like you can't treat me like one. And so like people who kind of explain things with complex terminology, like you got to kind of like talk to me like I'm, a smart, 18-year-old sometimes, in terms of like what I can actually understand. And like, I've been doing this for long enough that it's not like I'm coming from no place at all, but there's going to be things that have come up that are exceptions. And I need to be able to have someone who can explain those things to me, quickly. Also like, especially for an early fund, you're trying to close LPs and you're trying to like win deals, like, speed matters too. And so having someone who's like responsive, like, and who can kind of get back to us like quickly, and I don't feel like I'm like a second class citizen to their firm, especially at my fund size. Like it's an incentives thing as well. In the same way that like multi-stage funds, like clearly if you're a very small check with them won't matter as much. Like my fund size to a law firm, like I just won't matter as much. And so having those incentives be better aligned are kind of a couple of things that come to mind immediately.
I did want to kind of jump back just real quick to something that Leeor mentioned, because I think that this is also a huge barrier to entry traditionally. Leeor mentioned management fees and the front loading of management fees, and how that's kind of opening up access for emerging managers. And it is such a valuable thing to have become market. Basically, over the life of the fund, you'll have a 2% average, management fee, which is very market, and traditionally the 2.20 is market. But you'll front load it, so the first couple of years will be 4%, drop down after that, and over the 10 years, it will average out to 2%. And what that does is it allows you to kind of draw a reasonable salary in those early years for your investment period for your first fund, and then after you start stepping down that management fee, that kind of lines up when you're supposed to be raising fund 2. And then fund 2 layers in with its own management fees, and all of a sudden you have 2 funds producing management fees. So, whereas the management fee on a $10 million fund or a 2-partner $20 million fund might be kind of low, especially for folks who can go out and raise a fund like this. Like, they're definitely taking a pay cut to do it. With the front loading, you can kind of get a little bit more market, and it means that you can, sustain yourself and maintain your standard of living while taking this leap into becoming an emerging manager. But I want to, because we were talking about fund expenses and we jumped into management fee, I just want to point out, and I think that this is a very common mistake with emerging managers, that your management fee does not need to cover most of the expenses of running a fund.
Yeah.
So that management fee, almost in the entirety of that management fee for most emerging managers, should be salary basically into your pocket. And very few expenses should have to come and eat away at that. Generally a very modest management fee. So there's not a ton to eat away at. And I think that you get lots of emerging managers who think, oh no, I'm gonna have to pay for my fund admin. I'm gonna have to pay for the accounting. I'm gonna have to pay for all these incidentals out of my management fee. And it takes this kind of $200K top of line, and it takes it down to 50 or 75. While it could be negotiated that way by your LPs, market is that the fund pays for that sort of stuff, and it doesn't come out of your management fee. I think we should clear
That's a great point. Yeah.
Enough. I guess we'll end with maybe if there's one thing that you see as a common trapdoor, other than kind of some of the things we've spoken about. What's your your one piece of advice to emerging managers as they're getting started?
I think if you feel like you can raise, $5 million, you can probably start a fund. Fundraising is, and I think always has been, the true hard part of putting together a first fund. The fundraising is the hard part. All this infrastructure stuff, all that stuff is comparatively easy, and it comes together if you can raise the fund. So, don't get distracted by it. If it seems like all that stuff is going to be too expensive, you're probably, modeling it incorrectly, or you have people who are trying to take advantage of you. Focusing on fundraising and kind of setting all that stuff off to the side and engaging with it when you have true momentum. With the one caveat that I kind of gave a very succinct list of things you should be doing before you go out into market. Do those things, but then set all that stuff aside. Don't worry about it. Focus on fundraising. And as soon as you hit that momentum, the other stuff will come together. I think that's my key piece of advice.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Teal. This is really informative. Well, thank you, Teal, for joining. And Leeor for bringing him on. It was fun to kind of see his name pop up on our list of guests, since I also met him before. Jumping to this week's guest, it's actually one of our classmates who we also both know from GSV, Andrej, the CEO and founder of Lumos. Andrej is just really interesting. I met him and I knew immediately this guy has more energy literally 100% of the time, seemingly, that I know and anyone. And I think something I respect about him is that actually similar to some of our previous guests, I feel like he just lives his life and does things in his own way. And he can do that while also being wildly successful, which I think is really inspiring. Lumos itself, I'll be completely honest, at a first glance, is it the most amazing company or the most interesting company inherently? I'll admit, probably not. But the interview itself was incredible. Is more more incredible than the name can even provide. That being said, the company is wildly successful, a Series B company now. They just raised around a few months ago, I believe. And they essentially do like cybersecurity and IT management for large companies to manage access across employees for different vendors. But yeah, like I said, despite the, kind of one-liner of the company, even though it's, it's interesting in itself, I think it doesn't do the interview justice. I'm really excited to share this one. And yeah, welcome, Andrej. Andrej, thank you for coming and actually doing this interview. I appreciate it.
Hello.
Yeah. Well, okay. You were just talking about Croatia and Germany. Give us the TLDR of who you are. Yeah. How you got into tech and GSB, where we met. Give us the whole thing.
The whole thing. Oh my gosh. All right. Maybe the one word that maybe summarizes my life is like, I love Richard Branson, and he said, always screw it, just do it. And that's my vibe. Basically, I'm the oldest of five. Both my parents were immigrants from Croatia to Germany. They came to Germany shortly before there was a kind of a big war in Yugoslavia, right? And shortly before that started, they came to Germany. So I grew up with 4 younger siblings, and honestly, whole life was about let's do crazy stuff. So my first company that I built was when I was 14, I think. I grew up in a small village in the German Alps, and it was so boring. And we're like, Dad, we need to be cool. So, 2 of my friends and I want to be cool. And so we started an event management company, right? And it turned out at some point we kind of organized those big open air festivals, with actual singers and artists that people know coming. So that was cool. Then when I went to college, I was like, I read this book, Poor Economics, which Esther Duflo wrote. And she actually won the Nobel Prize for Economics for that 3 years ago or so. And basically it talks about how NGOs sometimes don't work, right? And then I had a friend in Uganda, and I said, screw it, just do it. So I just flew down there with a couple of friends, and we started 2 edtech companies or social enterprises in Uganda. Didn't tell my mom at that time. She freaking freaked out. Also crazy story about Uganda.
How old were you?
I was 19, I think.
And you went to Uganda on a whim. That's incredible.
Yes, and there was actually a crazy. I'll tell a story later. My first night in Uganda, I will never forget that. But that's screw it, just do it. By the way, my co-founders still live there. It's called Startup Africa, and they still live there, and I'm still building it. It's now basically the biggest startup incubator across different universities in East Africa. Then I was after college. I was like, everyone went to, those awesome companies like Meta and Google and McKinsey. And I was like, man, I don't know how I would succeed there because I just felt like, I wouldn't be good. Right. And so I was like, I want to serve my country. Right. But, I didn't have big muscles. I don't have them now here. And so I was like, man, I cannot become a Navy SEAL. I love Navy SEALs. Right. And I was, okay, let me just email the Federal Chief of Staff of Germany and tell him, hey, what do you think if I bring the 10 smartest people from Harvard and the best German schools to the German government, and we build for you instead of you outsourcing to Accenture or so. And for whatever reason, the Federal Chief of Staff, his Chief of Staff, reached out and said, my boss forwarded me your email. What's up? I was like, oh, shit. So it was screw it, just do it. We built a company. We got acquired by the German White House, or it's called the German Federal Chancellery under then Angela Merkel. And it's still around. My co-founders, lead this, and I think it's now over 200 people building technology for the nation's biggest problems. And then the screw it, just do it was, okay, I'm going to go back to Silicon Valley because it was 3 months before COVID. I knew I had to be here, right? So I got into, as a European, you need a visa. So school is the best way to get that. And so I did my MBA and my master in computer science at Stanford. And then COVID hit. And then there's so much cool innovation that happened. And I was like, screw it, just do it. And dropped out of business school and started Lumos. So that's the TLDR, screw it, just do it.
Love it. That makes so much sense given everything I know about you. Now knowing that's your mantra, that really does sum up everything that I think about you. That's incredible. I'm curious. Well, actually, and part of the reason why I say that is I remember meeting you when you kind of came to GSB, like pretty early. And I know you had talked about, exiting your last company, you wanted to do something new, but you hadn't started doing anything yet. You were just like, I know I really want to do this, but I need to find something. And like weeks later, I remember I happened to like run into you. I'm like, oh, like, how's it going? And like, you already had a full-fledged team, co-founders, I think funding, like all this stuff. And I was like, holy crap, this guy moves at lightning speed. And then I think the second thing, no,
You're the
truly,
famous person on campus, you
no,
see,
that's not
Jeff
true.
wasn't looking for me. I was looking for her, you see the power dynamic,
Yeah, I'm just a third person on the podcast.
No, I loved that. And then I remember, and actually the other thing that I'm impressed with, I feel like the idea that you ended up landing on is pretty similar to the idea that you have now, which is pretty rare. I feel like people go through ideating and iteration and rewriting history when their companies are bigger and more successful now. But I feel like really it's been pretty consistent.
Brian Chesky said this, and actually it resonated with me so much. That many people always say founders are visionaries, right?
Good.
And I think, I hoped that I would be, but maybe I don't think so, honestly, right? There are probably better people at that. I think I'm more of an explorer, right? And with whatever company I founded so far, I pick a mountain, right, or a region. You see, and then you need to find in this region. Hopefully you pick the right region. If you didn't pick the right region, you screwed up, right? And then this region has mountains, and you don't see the peak of the mountain, right? Some are small hills, some are big mountains, some are the largest mountains ever, right? And I think something that I build a good skill at is maybe I'm not the best visionary to pick the right region. I just pick one, whatever. But I think I build a skill to kind of explore what kind of big mountains are, right?
Yeah.
So that's why what you said, Steph, is like I always stayed in the world of cybersecurity and access, right? But we iterated like crazy. For 2 years, we had $0 in revenue. It was crazy, And so at some point you find, your product, and then hopefully it goes up.
What kind of advice do you have for people going through the exploration process? Because clearly you explored well. And other people are like trying to pick the right regions, and maybe you say that that's like more difficult for you. But on the exploration process, obviously there's some things that went very right. Curious if you have any advice to founders who are going through that themselves.
I think how I think about a brain. It's like a machine learning, a Gen A, like an LLM. You need to feed as much data as possible into your LLM. So in the first. Not a joke. In the first 4 months, I think I had 200 interviews. And the 200 interviews was literally like I asked friends and alumni and anyone on the world that I had that has something in common with me. Same city, has teeth, and no, I'm just kidding. Like anyone, I was saying like, hey, could you introduce me to your ex person? I'm starting something in here. And probably the conversion rate was 1%. But after 200 interviews, we started as a consumer business first. Then we started as a B2B business. We actually started to become first like a SSPM, which is called a SaaS Security Posture Management tool. That was our first thing. We actually thought that this category will be big, but won't be massive, right? So we moved on to SaaS management. Again, in that case, we also saw, great thing. SaaS management, SSPM is more about protecting your SaaS, right? SaaS management is more about cost efficiencies, but we also thought like, interesting, will be a nice market, but it won't be the biggest market, right? That's why we had for like 2 years no revenue. And then finally we landed in like the identity world, more or less. And our first paying product was what we call the App Store, where people could get access to the apps that they wanted. So going back to the initial question, it was just go freaking hard, right? And have as many interviews as possible. Like, literally, you should see it. Like, everything was noted down. Like, Otter at that time, noted down. Like, it was like kind of classic design thinking, but with a lot of force. And at some point, you connect the dots, in my opinion.
Was there a signal that you look for? Like you mentioned, some of the ideas that you explored, you just didn't feel like it would be a really big market. Like I know some people really try to get paying customers right away, and that's a signal to them that they need to double down in this space. Were there cues, either in the interviews that people said or behaviors that you were looking for to know the direction that you wanted to double down on?
Yeah, here's the one problem, and I want to get your opinion on this because I'm still trying to figure this out. I was thinking about if I started Lumos new. I actually thought about this 2 weeks ago. What would I have done? And in terms of cues, you're talking with so many different people. Number one, you talk with IT managers, CIOs, random people, and then you talk with small companies, medium-sized companies, enterprises, large enterprises, and everyone says something else. It's kind of confusing, guys. Because I talked with Visa because he was like a Stanford connection earlier. So I was like, oh shit, yeah, this makes a ton of sense. But then, the IT manager at Rapid SOS had totally different needs, right?
Yeah.
It's like, good Lord. Here's one thing I think I came to conclusion, and I'm wondering what you think. I think there are just two types of companies that can be successful. Successful and big time. They are the Rams, the Clavios, the Notions, where you need to find a need but be product-led growth, right? So you can have smaller kind of tickets, 10 grand, 15 grand, of average contract size, but you need to figure out how to kind of provide value with a free product, or something like a free product that can be sold just rapidly. So that's one. Or Rippling is one of those as well. The other one is the whizzes out there, the Workdays, even like a couple of SSPM solutions like Obsidian or App Omni that they started also in the big enterprise first. Now, I think you can either have success if you have an average annual contract size of over 100K or 15K, but with two different go-to-market motions. Now, you can start in the mid-market as we have. For example, Okta did this very successfully. We started in the mid-market because it's sometimes hard to sell to these enterprises, but you need to kind of just like your path is like, hey, I'm just selling to the mid-market because it's easier to go into the enterprise, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I've been thinking about is...
Yeah, I mean, Reid Hoffman calls this the valley of death, between the 10K and the 100K. So kind of using your kind of 15K, same kind of idea. And I think the problem with a lot of companies that get stuck in that valley of death is that ACVs aren't large enough, but yet their customers are requiring like a lot of customer success. It's actually not that fast of a sales motion. And so the juice isn't worth the squeeze from the start.
So how would you go about it though, when it comes to product discovery? Sometimes selling to like a Visa is impossible, right? But like, how do you do that when you know that you can be a PLG, but you're between 10 and 100K at the beginning?
And there's people who are like king and queen makers who can figure out how to sell into enterprise early. Now, the danger of that is you kind of overbill and it takes a long time to get any kind of customer discovery actually done because you're just focused on making Visa as happy as possible. And so what a lot of people do, to your point, and it sounds like what you guys did as well, is they start in the mid-market, and those are almost like proof of concept customers on some dimension. And either they eventually have some form of like SMB kind of sales or focused on that customer base, and you try to figure out what's like a pared down version of that product, or you really try to, elephant hunt and you try to go after like the kind of and focus all the company's energy on the larger contracts. Obviously there's like the PLG route, which is a little bit different, which is like the sub 15K. And even in those situations, you see like the Miros and Notions of the world and Superhumans, they're all like adding enterprise to your pricing. And so I think to your point, like those are types of products where actually like having customers start to see the magic of them, like enables them to eventually start to think about converting to an enterprise contract where maybe the friction is a little bit lower because they already know what the product looks like.
But the interesting thing is in startups, I agree with you. I mean, Miro, at some point, they need to do elephant hunt, but the cool thing is they're already distributed in all of those elephants.
Right.
The interesting thing is if you look into those companies and into those strategy meetings, and Lumos was the same. I was like, 2 years ago, we were all about like, hey guys, we have so much success in mid-market, let's protect the base, right? I'm like, shit, 4 years from now, maybe we'll grow next year.
Yeah.
4 years from now, you won't be able to build a generational business. So I feel like you get stuck, right? Trying to serve that and actually thinking about how, instead of like, this is a jumping board, how can we faster go to the next level? I'll be ready.
Yeah. I had a company that lost like a larger like an enterprise contract that would have like forced them to be on a small hill versus a big mountain, to use your earlier metaphor, that ended up being like one of the best things that ever happened to them. Because I think you end up getting stuck and getting pulled if you're not careful into these small hills or these mid-sized hills.
That's the insight. Dude, you're awesome. So the insight is that no. If you know you want to build a sales-led company and you know you want to go above 100K.
Yeah.
The insight is like, sure, you could hunt those 100K contracts first. If you're very certain about the market.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're very fucking certain about the market, that this is a market that's massive. If not, build mid-market, because you'll be able to be more nimble, figure out what the, differentiators are that you do uniquely, and take those 2-3 years of incubation.
Yeah. That's a good way of describing it, because that's what it is.
Great plug to work with Leeor. As a VC, or if you're a founder, you should work with Leeor as an investor. I agree with that too, even though we're frenemies. But anyway.
Appreciate that.
That's
Why
great.
are you frenemies?
Why are we frenemies?
Yeah.
Oh my God. How much time do you have? Leeor and I have been frenemies since day one. But no, we actually also started talking about how we're going to do a podcast on day one too. And that actually happened.
Actually
so
did it. And here we are. Yeah. We're
here
kind
we
of
are.
like meme, I guess, in ways. But yeah.
What's Leor's superpower?
So many, but I think it's really, he's a very good listener. We actually just did an interview yesterday with someone who runs a mental health company for teens. And we were talking about how, they use peer counselors as a therapist. And so anyway, we were talking about how Leeor used to be a hotline or suicide hotline. What do they call them? Counselor? As well. Yeah. And I think it's very obvious to me that is a formative experience for Leeor, because I think he's a very exceptional listener. Anyway, this is not a Leeor flattery session.
It's a school, honestly, in Silicon Valley, where there are a lot of, there's a lot of ego, right? And a lot of like vision. And I know what's up. I think one of the superpowers that can really distinguish you is what Leeor has, which is like listening or childlike wonder. I like the word childlike wonder, where you're like, wow, you just get amazed by so many things.
Yeah.
And
I would definitely say you have that. You would agree with that, right?
Maybe I have golden retriever energy. That could be,
I don't think you go from like building out like an education thing in Africa to also helping Germany on the kind of tech building side to doing what you're doing now without a little bit of that.
Okay, yeah, that's connecting dots in hindsight. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another insight. I agree with you.
By the way, before we get too far away from it, what was that first night in Uganda like?
Oh, all right. Check this out. So I'm 19. I land in Uganda, right? So we flew Emirates, which was nice, which was cheap. It was $500, a return, from Germany to Uganda. I was like, yeah, I feel so good. And Emirates, everyone is nice, gives me good food, right? Abu Dhabi, come to Uganda, freaking hop, but I was stupid at that time. I was like, I want to have my backpack light, right? So I put everything into my bag, right? So I come there, bag is not here. I was like, God bless me. How am I ever going to find in Uganda? But I'm okay, fine. So I go out. And so a cab picks me up, like a friend, and says, hey, by the way, I'm getting married today. I said, what? Yeah, you invited, why are you picking me up on your wedding day?
Wait, are you friends with this person, or like
I knew
friendly?
I was like, I knew him over, that's a beautiful thing in those countries, and in Croatia as well, is, if you know someone that knows someone, and they say like, this is a great person, there's just like so much friendliness and hospitality in those countries. So we are joking, etc. I have this kind of shitty t-shirt. I'm sweating my ass off, right? I don't have anything, not even a toothbrush, right? And so I arrived there, and we have this amazing wedding. And like, it's amazing. It's a small wedding. And then they say, I say, like, hey, where am I staying? And they say, and then the bride and the husband is saying like, hey, at our place. I said, okay. So I come there, and it's literally like a living room and a room without a door. And I'm like, wait,
Oh,
On
wow.
their wedding
I'm-
night?
I'm staying in your wedding night
Oh,
here. I said, yeah, of course.
Oh my God.
And I said, okay, let me just go to bed. You go for a walk or something, and then I'm already passed out. Yeah,
Oh
That's
my God.
amazing.
that's my.
Incredible.
I also think it's like people who are able and like to handle like ridiculousness well, I think is also a superpower. So that's hilarious. I love that.
By the way, that's one thing. If I think about raising children, like, hey, like ridiculousness happens, you cannot control for it, right? So how do you? I think the best way to learn, grow like a kid, or even like a report of yours or someone is like make things unpredictable and
Yeah.
let them fall in with like me in Uganda. I was like, fuck, like suddenly I was on this kind of, they call it boda boda, and this guy was freaking drunk and was like driving. I was like, oh shit. So I was like, okay, how should I handle this? And I wonder, like, and maybe also for your personal development, if you feel like you want to take the next step, where do you want to take the next step, and where can you put yourself into an uncontrolled environment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Grow.
I'm actually curious because, I mean, you have kind of talked about the, screw it and just do it thing. And you've had these kind of like three very distinct chapters. When do you decide how do you think about like when it's time to like move on to the next chapter for you versus like stick it out with your original chapter?
Yeah. I mean, let me walk you through the fourth, and then maybe let's find a pattern. And also it depends also in what period of life you are, right? So early in your life, you just want to increase learning, right? So the first one, the event management company, I mean, listen, like, you can just grow this so much. And then at some point we're like, okay, let's move on. Then Uganda, I mean, my co-founders are still doing it. It's very impactful, but I felt like, man, there is a ceiling with social enterprises. And believe me, it hurt my heart when I told this to myself. But there's a couple of successful ones. But the end is so small,
Yeah.
And of course, you could build the next one, but the likelihood is just like smaller, right? And I was like, okay, freaking hell, I think I hit a ceiling. I will hit a ceiling. Let's move on. So I tried to kind of find the biggest ceiling possible out there, which was the government, right? And honestly, I would have stayed in the thing forever. I was just like, at that time I was like, 24 or so, or 23. And I was like, man, I want to learn. Eventually, I actually want to go back to the government. But I want to learn what it is to be at peak performance. There's a government, of course, at peak performance. And I want to kind of go to the center of capitalism, which is actually Silicon Valley, in my opinion, not Wall Street anymore. And so that's why I came to Silicon Valley to literally kind of, compete against the best, right? And now, when am I going to move on to the next chapter, once we're the best, right? I think we have a good shot at it, and that'll take many years. So that's that.
How do you balance, like, in building up the team, like there's like the mindset that you're kind of getting at on the personal level, and you also want parts of your team to have that, and yet you're also doing things in kind of like the compliance and kind of, trying to create things securely, like identity management, all these kinds of things that are a little bit more, if you mess up, like it's a bad thing. Like, how do you think about like building the right team to have the right risk-taking mentality, but also a product that actually like does the thing that you say that you're going to do, which is so important to your customers?
Yeah. I mean, I recently thought about this. Is we are about to close one of the 50 biggest companies in the world. I'm like, freaking hell, we're gonna do probably all on and offboarding for them, and if we fuck up, that means hundreds of people probably won't do certain things. So so here's how I think about this. That's why I love platform products, right? So basically what a compound or a platform product is, so many platforms can be, let's call it a compound product. For everyone that's listening here, a compound product basically is you have platform functionalities and a data model that a ton of other products can leverage. For example, our data model is the access data model. Each of our products needs to know who has access to what. They need to know, who's the employee, and they need to know like what access they have. Let's say they have a Zoom, but a Zoom Pro license. Now, for Rippling or Workday, that's the employee object. For Salesforce, that's the customer object. So each of those, you have a data model, and then you have platform functionalities on top of it. For us, every product needs workflows. Every product needs provisioning integrations, like creating accounts and removing accounts. And so early on, which is actually a blessing that we did this. So that was like more, I don't know why we did this, is 2021, when everything went up for everyone. There was a lot of point solutions built, right? But we stayed in stealth for over 2 years and said, nope, let's not do that. Let's actually build up a more cohesive platform and then kind of to accelerate moving forward, right? So basically now we have already 5 products that we're selling as a 4-year-old company. Whereas usually like that, you start building a second product after you hit $10 million in revenue, right? That's the old playbook, right? That's a YC playbook. Get to one specific pain point and then, and whatever. Now, going back to your question. So now we have 2 teams. One team called, actually our head of engineering, Jude, was leading Google Docs, Sheets, etc. And they had 2 teams there. One was called Team Base and one was called Team OMG. Team Base was like the platform team that had to think long-term. The platform team was thinking about one-way decisions, a lot of one-way decisions. Like, hey, if I make this decision, there's probably no way back, right? Yeah. So that's, you give them the accountability to kind of think 6, 9, 12 months ahead, right? Yeah. And then you have Team OMG, or our product teams, which is actually pretty cool to work in a company like a Ramp or Lumos or Rippling. You have a metric that's different from all the other metrics of the team. Yeah. You're a small team, you go as fast as possible. Plus, you have platform teams that build stuff for you so that you can, kick your product out faster. Yeah. And so that maybe my response to it is like, building a platform product and giving the platform teams time to think longer term is probably the way how we protect our business while being innovative.
Are there base people and OMG type people, or how do you think about like the inner workings between the two?
So I mean, like, let me shout out a couple of people. Is one person is Team OMG is a person called Austin, and we had a customer, Pinterest, and he wanted to get them live so much that he himself, no one knew it, had weekly calls, hidden, had weekly calls with their champion. They're much like building stuff with them all the time, right? Yeah. Like extremely product-driven people, and also people that are willing. The thing is, in startups, which is really hard, is sometimes you set a roadmap for your product 3 months in advance, but then things change a month in.
Sure.
And you need to pivot. And for some people, that's fine. Some people are like, hey, I just tried to ramp up right now, and now I'm which is actually also true. You're ramping up, so you never make really progress. So team-based people are people that when you give them time, you see not a lot of progress in the first month, but then suddenly, they fully execute that. So let's see what do we have there. I mean, in the early days, we built a product called Flows, which is workflows, which is actually temporal on steroids before temporal was a thing, right? And because of that was like 2 years ago, we built a new product called Lifecycle Management, like about a year ago. We're able to build it 3 times as fast, right, as competitors. So basically, it's those people that think long-term. They think like, hey, this is a new use case that we need to unlock in 12 months from now, 18 months from now. Mm-hmm. So totally different thinking. So I think those are the two types of people.
Andrej, I feel like we have to talk about your fundraising strategy. I feel like you should literally teach a whole school on it. I'm like not even kidding. I feel like you're exceptional.
I'm probably
no, Andrej, you are. No, you truly are though. And it also fits in really well with what your mantra fits in really well with the experiences that I've had with you on this topic. But I also think you are unique in the sense that I feel like you have the ability to be overconfident and make mistakes, but then do it in a way that's not going to be like permanently damaging. I think it's actually like a very thin line to have, and I feel like you're perfectly on it, which is the ultimate compliment, truly. I feel like you just have to share more. I'm curious about, you came to Silicon Valley, and that was the first time you had come to Silicon Valley, right? For Stanford and for Lumos. What was that? What was like the culture shock like? How did you start building your network from zero? Like, how did you think about raising VC, if at all?
Here's maybe not a hot take, but maybe an obvious take, but many people don't do it. And actually, I think many VCs don't do it as well. And only the best VCs have done it. And I think that's why they're succeeding. So let me tell you this. So I'm going to tell you the wrong founder mentality. And then I'm going to shout out, even though I've never been a VC, I want to tell the wrong VC mentality in my opinion. So here's the thing. Wrong founder mentality is, and by the way, I used to be one of those. It's like, I don't want to talk with VCs. It's a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. Right? I actually think you're wrong. You're just not asking for the things that you need. Right? Our first customer that we ever closed, or a second customer, was a customer introduced by one of the investors that we early talked with. By the way, they didn't end up investing in us, but we closed a $100K deal, because they said it. So I think one thing that people, actually a friend told this to me is like, Andrej, you have a lot of love, but you just ask for things. And sometimes I'm like, it's a little out there, it's, you are just asking for things. And so you, as founders, engage with VCs, especially the ones that you love, and ask for things. Don't just ask for advice, ask for practical things. Hey, you're doing a career performance review. Can you, connect me with someone that built the whole career performance, framework? We need to talk with them. Or, hey, I'm building out the channel. Can you introduce me to 3 people that could be great candidates for us? Right? Yeah. So ask, even and I have always asked, even in early conversations with people. In fact, I sometimes tell VCs, hey, right now is not a good time. I'm really sorry. But if you have a CIO that is cool to talk with, just jump on the call with me and with them, and you'll hear firsthand how we're pitching Lumos, and we can debrief you and I after for 15 minutes. Right?
Smart. Wow, there we go.
By the way, that's why A16Z was so great. I don't even know why Joel from A16Z, I met him early. Our idea was like a piece of shit in June 2020. Like it was like, it didn't even smell how bad it was, right?
Wait, what was it? I swear it was the same. No, you guys just said it well.
Yes, but it was like, think about it. Like someone come in there and it's COVID, and like Joel has been in security for 20 years. He's the best security founders, right? And I come in there and come like with interesting ideas. And looking back, the idea was bad. It wasn't bad, but it was very. If I was Joel, I would have said like, dude, like get the heck out of here. We are different than you are. But he was like, no, actually, the space is interesting. He told me your idea doesn't make sense, but the space is interesting. You seem interesting. Let me introduce you to 4 CISOs. He introduced me not just to 4 random CISOs. He introduced me to the CISO of LinkedIn, the CISO of Uber, the CISO of, I don't know who else, Cloudflare. I was like, oh shit, So what I'm trying to tell this season here is, if you really love a company, right? The best way how you can get their attention is freaking get on a call with them with a portfolio company and a buyer, right? Sure. Why not? They will love you for that. It's crazy how few VCs do that. It's insane. Yeah. Now, you can probably do this for every startup because, you run out of contacts. But for the ones that you really love, do it. So that was a long monologue about that.
In terms of founders, you mentioned one thing that you recommend is like asking very directly, but there's also something clearly about you and how you show up and the preparation you do, or something that makes people feel confident in introducing you to, great context in their Rolodex. Like, what do you think you do well in those meetings, or, when you take people's time that allows you to stand out in that way?
You're putting it into good words. You're taking people's time, right? They're taking your time, you're taking their time. It's a gift that you give each other, right? And that's why when I get pissed at myself is when I'm in a meeting 5 minutes late. I actually hate it, all right? I really dislike it. Maybe it's a minute or 2, it's fine. But if I'm late, not to an internal meeting for 5 minutes, I feel I disrespect everyone's time because there are like 4 other people waiting. So 4 times 5 is 20 minutes. And it's just like a waste of time and it's disrespectful, right? So now they're giving your time, just like show up. It's actually crazy how many people show disinterested. It doesn't mean you don't even need to do your research. Be fucking curious, ask them about their lives, One question I always like to ask is like, what's been on your mind lately, right? Just said, like, I also hate this. This is so, like, that's the only thing I don't like. I love America as the greatest country in the world, but the one thing I don't like, how are you? Where are you located? Ah, nice.
Really
I'm like, dude,
Yeah. Oh.
Wait, is that not normal in Germany? Is that, what do people open their calls with?
No, in Germany they get straight to the point, but it's like,
That's better, actually.
No. I mean, I actually, but in Croatia it's different. In Croatia, it's like, you look happy. What's happening in your life? I'm curious. There must have been something, right? Yeah. Well, wow, this picture behind you, like, this is your family. It looks beautiful. Tell me more about it, right? You're naturally curious about a person, and you do big talk, not small talk, right?
Yeah. Right.
So anyways, go in with big talk, go in with curiosity. They're gifting your time, you're gifting it to them. And I think then, you just connect with people and you help each other.
I think what you're getting at, like, and what I don't like is, like, everyone sometimes treats each other as like each other's assembly line, and it's like, all right, I need to hit my things as we start the conversation, and that's the first 5 minutes, and that we're essentially assembly lining each other. And I think, for one, like, especially in like a founder VC type relationship, when you're going to be, working together for 10 years, and so actually figuring out ways to actually truly be helpful and truly being curious about, like, the founder's life, to your point, like, that is like the types of ingredients which at least give you the idea that, okay, this person actually, like, gives a shit, and also, like, is willing to figure out ways so that we can, like, figure out if there's like a partnership here. And I think most people are just like, they kind of like, they even like turn into a robot themselves. Like, you might as well just have an AI at the call, if you're going to do that kind of stuff. And
what is the guy called? Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell.
I don't know, it sounds Malcolm Gladwell is psycho, motivational, whatever. But one thing
I don't think so.
It starts in the Uber, in my opinion. Just like put your fucking phone away, right? I mean, like, you will maybe write 3 emails, but it won't really help you anyways. It's crazy what stories you hear. I heard this one story. Let me just tell you this. It was crazy just the other day in LA. So I was driving. I was from LA back to San Francisco. I was asking him, like, hey, what's your thing? How's your family? And he says, like, by the way, I have a business. I said, wow, tell me more about it. And he said, it's beauty on wheels. I said, shit, this is very, snappy. What is it? So basically, when COVID hit, his wife is a, makeup artist. And because people couldn't go anywhere, the thing how they innovated is they had a van where they went to the house, and she didn't go into the house, right? But the person came into the van, right? It looked like a kind of beauty shop. It looks beautiful, pink, whatever, right? And they have now 8 fucking vans, right? That's like, freaking hell. And like, he showed me all those pictures on Instagram with Jennifer Lopez, and it's like, why the heck are you Uber? I said, you know what? We are opening Barber on Wheels next, and every dollar is getting invested in that. So I'm doing Uber. I kind of make some extra.
So incredible. Yeah.
That's super cool.
Wow. Like, awesome story. Yeah. Awesome story. So it starts there.
I'm actually curious, do you have like a personal CRM or something? Like, I asked that for 2 reasons. Like, one, when you were talking earlier about how you make direct asks to people, like, I think part of the reason that part of the mistakes that I see people make is when they ask for things, they're either not specific, which you had addressed, or they don't ask like the right person for the right thing. Like, you might have something that's on your mind, but you ask me for CISO intros. It's like, my background's in consumer. I don't know anything about CISOs. Like, I'm not the right person. So I'm curious, like, from a practical perspective, like, one, do you keep a personal CRM or some kind of CRM for that? And then 2, I will say, from knowing you, I feel like you do have a general, like a genuine curiosity, and also like an exceptional memory, and it comes off as very natural. But I'm like, so many people and you meet so many people. I'm like, how is that even possible? So I'm just curious if there's like a secret behind that.
You're who could forget you?
Obviously, exactly. Thank you. This is the secret. Flatter the other person.
No, just no, I mean, honestly, that's maybe one flaw of mine. I think one flaw of mine is, and I admire a couple of friends there that do this pretty well. is sometimes they're just like are so good at just calling people and checking in. I don't hate. Some people hate text messages, but you can just like send them a video or call them real quick. And personal CRM would be great for this, but honestly, I'm not that scientific about things. So that's maybe you need a CRM less so for who should I ask for what. Honestly, it's serendipity, right? For example, I was at dinner with Sabrina Hahn, one of our investors in New York. I just want to catch up with her, honestly. And she tells me about all those cool things. And then we just talked about life for an hour. And then turns out she knew 3 people, which were like execs at those, retail companies that we actually want to break into. I said, can you send that? Can I send you just like an email? And turns out we got an intro out of this. And even though she has nothing to do, with CISOs in the first place. But what I'm trying to say is like, it's less so about needing a CRM to know who to ask for what, right? No. Because that just happens. I think it's important building a mechanism, and I'm the worst at this. So like, this is like my number one area to grow. It's just like tracking, check in and be there for people. Because like, think about it. Yeah. I'm going to grab lunch. Sending someone a video quickly at calling someone, it's so simple, but it's so hard at the same time. So yeah, that's why a CRM would be good, I guess. Remembering birthdays. I wonder how how do you remember birthdays and all that kind of stuff? What do you do?
Well, now I don't remember them anymore because I deleted my Facebook, and so I'm just a shit friend that way. Or if they're like their significant other posts something on like Instagram, that's about the only
way. Too real. Well, I was going to say, Andrej, I feel like the thing about you, though, is you have, I feel like, the check-in thing I think is great, but it's also unrealistic to expect anyone to check in with like more than like a dozen people, 2 dozen people, even if you're exceptional at it, But I think, I'm sure you're also underselling yourself, but I think you make people feel very like heard in the moment, or I think you also show up with a genuine kind of good intent, or you can tell that you were like well-researched or you're very motivated. So what I'm trying to get at, I think there's a lot of inherent stuff in how you show up with people that make them feel closer to you than maybe they are in terms of the number of times they talk to you, or like, someone that you barely know opening their Rolex to you to, offer great interest. I think that alone is a great lesson for me, other founders, whoever, which is cool.
Yeah. That was one of the biggest learnings, maybe, but honestly, I've learned a lot in the last 3 years on a business side. Maybe it's kind of a good final point to make is Alex, she's our head of operations and finance. What she's very good at is like, figuring out problems when they're actually people problems. And people problems meaning when it's not like process or whatever, when a person just like doesn't feel a certain way. And actually, I was just in an interview yesterday with this one candidate. Right, and it was amazing, and I'll make it. I'm going to make my point in a sec. What I'm trying to make here, but he said he was like this senior manager or director of platform engineering, right? And he got data science as a new thing because head of data science left, and they said it's a big attrition problem. He left bad vibes. You figure it out, and he was like, "Fuck." I don't know anything about data science. Those people will leave immediately because they'll think that I'm a leader that can manage them. Then turns out when he talked with them, it was more of a feeling problem where people felt they don't have a mission. Data science felt like I just got pushed to kind of create reports. Yeah. I'm not sure what my mission is, how I'm making the company successful. And so one thing, it came from me to feelings to mission. One thing actually that we want to change in our performance reviews is not just say what behaviors you need to improve, right? Hey, you need to talk more, or whatever. Give a person a mission. Hey, over the next 6 months, and it doesn't need to be improve this product. It can be over the next 6 months, it can be a little bit more high level. But this is what I want to talk with you, and this is why you are unique to Lumos. And if you lead, you're priceless. And this can be your hero's journey, right? And I think feelings and mission building is something I think that's not often talked about, in my opinion. To management and leadership.
I love that. Leeor, do you want to wrap us up with rapid fire?
Yes, absolutely. So these are questions that are meant to be answered kind of in one sentence or less. A book that most changed your life.
The Alchemist.
Is that why everyone on your team has Alchemist in their title?
Lumos comes from Harry Potter. and we didn't want to call ourselves wizards. It's kind of strange. And
I love that.
Those
Alchemist is better than wizards. I agree.
I agree.
Good branding.
But you're also a wizard too. So, what job you'd want if you couldn't be a founder?
I told this and I mean it. I love being an SDR, honestly. Like booking.
You'd be great at it.
Yeah.
Booking meetings is the coolest thing ever. It gives me so much joy. So that would be good.
Love that. I think it's the first time we've gotten that. I love that. Favorite account could be a newsletter, Twitter account, meme account that you follow.
Honestly, I
Do you not consume any media? You don't consume any media or anything? That's impressive. No, I've actually
here's one thing I read every single week. I don't like Tim Ferriss's newsletter, but I love the poems that he adds at the end. Ferriss is a newsletter and he has awesome poems. And so I love that the newsletter.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What was your first entrepreneurial endeavor? Was it the events business? And also, if it was, then I'll caveat this question to say, who was your favorite artist that you brought?
This is an artist called, there are a lot of German rappers that came. Yeah. And so we just had a ton of German rappers, because at that time, when you're 18, 16, 15, you're just gangster rap. And so you probably don't know, but it was a good time.
Love it. And it could be related to Lumos or not. The mega trend you're most excited about?
Or your hottest take. I feel like you have lots of good hot takes. I feel like it's simmering in you. Spill them all.
Honestly, I think we had a lot of hot takes today. I think this is not a hot take, but I think the trend that the whole world will go after, like 1990s were all about software was born, right? More or less. 2000s was all about cloud, right? 2010s was all about multiplayer, like product-led growth, multiplayer game. I think 2020s is all about autonomous software, where software will do work for us, right? I think that's probably a trend over the next 8 years to be a part of it.
Andre, thank you so much for the time. This was awesome. You are so energizing, so it's really fun to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. You can find us at somethingnewpod.com. You can follow Steph at StephMui, M-U-I, on Twitter. You can follow myself, Leeor, at Albution on Twitter. Catch us again next time.
Cool. I thought it went well.